Kevin Williams from the Shore Sports Network, and I'm here with our main boys basketball editor, Matt Manley, and we're getting set to talk about the Shore Conference basketball tournament. The seeding will take place on Sunday. Action begins with the opening round next Tuesday, and of course it all leads up to the championship game on Saturday, February 29th. That will be part of a girls-boys doubleheader at the Ocean First Bank Center at Monmouth University. And Matt, as we sort of start, the theme has to be, for most of this winter, it has been Manasquan and everyone else. Does it look that way heading into the seeding of the Shore Conference tournament?
It seems that way, and all the evidence we have so far this year is that Manasquan is the best team in the Shore and their number one contender, contender to beat them, at least based on the resumes, is Middletown South, and they already beat Middletown South handily. So, yes, you would think, logically, Manasquan's the team, but, you know, the problem with them is they haven't been totally healthy. They played well even though they haven't been healthy, but Alex Galvan right now has got something else going on with his shin, and at this point it's just precautionary. There's no reason to expect him to miss significant time, but you don't know. It's going to be one of those things. It might be a kind of a pain tolerance thing, it sounds like, but we still have to see if they're going to have a full roster, and even if they don't, they've shown that they can handle themselves with injuries. They played Roselle Catholic tough. They beat St. Peter's Prep, who's a top 10 team that's in the state right now. So I think, yeah, you do have to kind of give them that spot as the team to beat. But I think with the way Middletown South's playing right now, and with a little bit of uncertainty in the Manasquan lineup, there's just enough drama going into this tournament that you could maybe hold your breath a little bit until the final before we start crowning anybody. But no question about it, Manasquan's earned the top seed, and even if there's a little bit of an injury issue with them going into the tournament, they've proven that they have overcome it before, and they should absolutely be considered the favorite regardless of who they play in the semifinals or whenever they play.
And the irony is that I think going into this year, the feeling was it would be a little bit more wide open than it had been in previous years. Modern Day Prep, back-to-back champions, 2016 and 2017. And then, of course, the Rani Show the past couple of years, winning 2018 and 2019. But Manasquan, from the beginning of the season, has really emerged as the best team in the Shore. And I don't think there's any doubt they'll earn that number one seed on Sunday. Now, you, earlier this week on shoresportsnetwork.com, have made a case for what you think the seeding might be. Of course, from the time you wrote that until Sunday, there will be games that could change that. But the one thing we do think is it's going to be a crowded field.
Well, yeah, you're sitting right now with 28 teams that are 500. I mean, you have to figure, if Point Beach beats Keyport, it's going to be 28. You have to kind of assume Freehold Township finds a way in, even if they have to beat Colts Neck on that last day. But, you know, they should get in. And those are the only two up in the air. They're 26 in, 28 could be in, and you take this field, you go up to maybe number 7 with CBA playing as well as they are, and Walt probably slots in at 6 or 7 right now, depending on how much CBA does before the cutoff. After 7, I think there's some vulnerability in the teams that you would put like 8 to 14, where if they get the wrong matchup against a team that might settle into the 20s. You know, I have teams like, one team that I'm looking at in the 20s is like a Manchester. We've seen them this year play Marlboro tough, and they've got a lot of young talent. They could be a real problem for a team like Manalapan or RBC or Mater Dei or Lakewood, who is in that like 8 to 13 range. So there are a lot of teams, and that kind of sets the table for some upsets early in the tournament. But I do think there is like kind of a collection of 7 teams right now that have started to distinguish themselves. And even within that 7, you have Manasquan, you have Middletown South, Toms River North's had a great year. So I think you do see kind of a pecking order from 1 to 7, and then after that there's a lot to sort through if you're on that committee or if you're just kind of running numbers like I am, trying to figure out what I'm going to be looking at on Sunday.
Now, I'm an old school guy. So I believe tournaments at the end of the year, you earn your way into them. It's a reward for having a good season. In the old days, the Shore Conference tournament was a 16-team event. You know, they would get to 16 and that was it. If you were number 17, you didn't make it. Are you a fan of this 500 getting in? Or if I said, would you like to go back to the old days where 16 got in, everyone else watched?
I go back and forth on it. I think there's certainly some drama in having like 16 spots, and that makes it a lot more stressful to pick it, because
Sure.
if a team, it's one thing if you get like a 21 seed when you think you should be a 13 seed, because then it's like, all right, well, I have a tougher game in the first round than I wanted to. But if you think you're a 13 and you're like the second team off the list, you don't even get a game. So I think this just makes it easier, and I don't. It's hard to totally put it into context, because it's been a while since it hasn't been that way since I've been covering it around here. So I look at those first round games as these teams did earn their way into the tournament in some degree. They had to get to 500. Nobody in this group is like picking up games left and right. Everybody's playing the schedule that's in front of them to get in. So with that in mind, if somebody's a 22 seed, maybe they were underseeded and they go beat the 11 in the first round. And I think the way this field is structured, you are going to have, if it's 28 teams, you're going to have the 5 seed playing in the first round. And like I said, I think that 5 seed is safe. And I think CBA or Wall, if they're 6 or 7, should be safe. But once you get to 8, I think if you're Manalaban or you're Red Bank Catholic, even Rani, we don't totally know what they are yet. Like, these teams are going to have to play well in the first round to get by, because somebody is going to be waiting on the other side that is fairly capable.
All right, so I think everyone agrees Manasquan is the 1 seed, and Middletown South is almost as secure in the 2 spot as Manasquan is in the 1. Does it get interesting after that? There's to become a debate start at 3, or where does the debate begin?
Yeah, I think you can have a debate at 3, because I think Homedale's played well enough since that Carteret loss in December. Basically, they lost to Carteret in December, and since then their only losses have been to Manasquan. One of them was a rout, but the other one was one of the better games of the year. I mean, it's certainly the best challenge Manasquan's gotten within the Shore Conference. You had that Rumson game that was similar, where Rumson took them down to the wire, but they kind of held the ball, and they tried to gimmick it up almost by holding the ball and limiting possessions, whereas Homedale just kind of played and had a shot to beat them. I mean, they played physical. Alex Galvan was just coming off that injury, but he was also the difference in the second half. So I think, you look at what Homedale's done since December, they've certainly put the pressure on Toms River North, and Toms River North just has the 1 loss to Lincoln that gives you a little bit of pause, because they've just run roughshod through Class A South. So when they go play Lincoln, you really put them under the microscope to see how they play. And they lost that game. They had a little bit of a struggle against Mainland. So Toms River North might have, maybe they've left the door open a little more than they would have liked for Homedale to step through and take the 3. And that's probably the biggest argument at the top of the field, because I don't think it matters that much who gets the 4 or the 5. And if Homedale does get the 3, I would go with Toms River North, but there's definitely a case to be made for Homedale. If they do get the 3, North's clearly the 4, because they beat Marlboro. Whereas I think if Homedale and Marlboro are arguing over the 4-5, there's more of an argument, because I think Marlboro has a few more noteworthy wins. And if you look at their losses, you're talking 3 losses to Middletown South and 1 to Manasquan, and then another to CBA. I mean, those are all pretty excusable losses. And they have a win over CBA. So I think that 3 to 5, there's some room to move around, but I don't think Marlboro's in play for 3.
Toms River North has a pretty good game on their schedule Saturday. Is that a game where if they win that, they maybe lock up the 3, or at least secure the argument that, hey, look, all right, so A South was weak, we beat everyone, you can only beat who you play.
Correct.
And then look what we did it would be yesterday when they're making that argument on Sunday.
Yeah, they're playing New Brunswick, who's had a good year. They're the 2 seed in Central Jersey Group 4 as it stands right now. That looks like it's going to be finalized. So, yeah, you beat the 2 seed in Central Jersey Group 4 right before the cutoff. I think that makes a pretty good case, depending on what how the game goes. Maybe it's another close game, maybe they roll. But I do believe they're going there, so it's a road game against that team. So, you go do that, and I think that makes a pretty good case but Homedale is going to have a chance to state their case against Manalapan, who's a pretty solid Group 4 team that's had a good year as well. So they're both going to have a chance to make their case. Like I said, I think Toms River North has the slight edge, but Homedale's played that A Central schedule where they play Rumson twice, RBC twice. They still play RBC this week. They had to play Manasquan twice and played them very tough in the 1 game. So, yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a case to be made, and I don't know that there's a wrong answer at this point. And that to me, the 3-4 is a little bit more interesting than the 4-5 because there are real consequences for who you play in that semifinal or in the quarterfinals versus the 4-5, which is essentially just posturing. And there is a head-to-head with Marlboro and Toms River North, so I think Marlboro is definitely going to be the 4-5, depending on how it shakes out. Whereas Homedale could be anywhere from 3-5.
Let me throw out a couple of teams that maybe a month ago we wouldn't have thought too highly of, but things have changed for them. We'll start with CBA, who has gotten much better.
Yes, and their story has been youth and injuries. They've been young all the way through. They basically run a rotation of just juniors and sophomores. They do play one senior a little bit, so you kind of knew they were going to be a work in progress over the course of the season, but then you throw in injuries to Ryan Mabry, who's had two different things that he dealt with. He's back now. You have another sophomore, Matt Lotato, who replaced Mabry when he got hurt, and then he got hurt. So, and the kind of story with CBA has been, they lose a guy, and usually Mabry, they lose Mabry, play terrible for 2 games, and then start to play better without him. Then he comes back, they start to get it together, they lose him, play terrible for 2 games, then start to reconfigure and start playing well. So they've been a team that's needed to adjust to those injuries, but they've been able to adjust to them in time. And now they're sitting there with a full rotation that they haven't really had all year, and it's starting to look like a team that could beat somebody. They played Middletown South tough twice. They took them to overtime at Middletown South and had a chance to win the game. Mabry was just coming off an injury, didn't look like himself that game, but gutted it out and played. If they had a healthy Mabry, and they might win that game. And then they go host Middletown South. It's a game most of the way. Middletown South ends up winning by 10, but that's a pretty competitive showing against a Middletown South team that's beaten everybody pretty handily since losing to Manasquan in December.
Probably a team Middletown South doesn't want to see.
Right.
If they don't have to.
I don't think they do want to see them, so I think Middletown South sitting there hoping that CBA argues their way out. Well, not that CBA is going to do the arguing, but they're hoping that the coaches are convinced that CBA should jump Wall. And I think there's a compelling argument, because if you look at the two teams, Wall right now has 4 losses, but if you look at what they've done outside of B North, and they're undefeated in B North going into the end of the week against Matawan, which is no gimme. But if they do beat Matawan, they probably lock up that 6 seed. But I might, I still want to see them give Manasquan a nice run. Like, you certainly don't have to beat them, but give me a good game into the 4th quarter. Make it scrap. They played them tough last year. Scrap. See if you can slow the game down. See if you can keep it close. Even if it ends up being like a 12-point game, I think if we see enough from Wall against Manasquan, I don't touch them at 6 because they have done really good work in their division. They only have 4 losses. But if they have 5 losses and CBA has 9 and CBA beats RBC, who beat Wall by 15 points, there's an awfully compelling case to bump CBA up to 6, which I think Middletown South would prefer because they've already seen CBA twice. They beat them twice, and I think they'd just like to be done with CBA. They'd rather play Wall at this point, even if, it's hard to say which team's better at this point, but I think a lot of teams would just rather not see a team for a 3rd time, especially one that's coming around like CBA is.
The other team I find interesting are the 2-time defending champions, Ranny. Scotty Lewis is gone, Brian Antoine is gone, but a team that you had told me back in December, shaky early, guys are going to grow up, get a little experience. They're going to get guys who are not eligible right now. In February, they'll make some noise, and it looks like that's starting to happen.
Yeah, and we'll learn a lot about them on Thursday night when they play at Mater Dei. They handled Mater Dei at Randy the first time they played. They didn't have Kyle Roden in that game. They will have Kyle Roden on Thursday night. It's a big game for both teams because Mater Dei can move a lot. If they can move up the standings, up the seeds, if they beat Randy. They can win a co-title. They can move up into the top 10. There's a lot on the line for both teams, but for Randy, they really need to make a statement against Mater Dei. And even if they just beat them by 5, I think that's enough to say, hey, listen, we beat a pretty good Mater Dei team twice. Is our resume in December shaky? It is. Losing an 8-13 Red Bank regional team in the Buck Classic, it's a tough loss. At the time, they lost to Burlington Township by double digits. It looked like that was going to be, like Burlington Township was going to be a good team, but Burlington Township has struggled a little bit this year too. So those 2 losses are raise a little bit of a red flag with Randy. But again, like you said, they are a much, much different team now than they were back then. And you do have to look at the resume. You are seeding the body of work, but you kind of have to use some common sense here. If Randy is walking into that meeting with 2 comfortable wins over a Mater Dei team that should also be seeded in the top 12, top 13, something like that. Mater Dei should be in that range based on what they've done.
Give me a couple of other teams that you think could make some serious noise when this thing gets underway.
Well, the team I'm really curious to see how they respond is Lakewood, because they started the year, the word on them was they're going to be better. Ryan Savoy was back as a senior, and he was ready to kind of take the lead for them. And they have 2 freshmen who've been pretty prominent in Samir Padilla and Respect Tyleek. But they did start pretty rough.
Poorly,
and since then, they've been pretty reliable. I mean, as reliable as any team you're going to find with the way they've handled late game situations, with the way they've come out and played. And I thought they looked really strong against Point Borough when I saw them on the road. So the question with them is, like, what do they look like outside of B South? Because, like, the B South teams all seem pretty good, but, like, it's hard to know, like, what they do against a step up in competition. You worry about Point Borough losing to Brick Memorial, but, like, you take a team like Barnegat, they haven't lost outside their league. Now, is their out-of-conference schedule that great? Not really, but, they beat Red Bank Regional, who's one of the better teams that didn't make the tournament. They beat Jackson Memorial, who just missed the tournament. They beat a decent Princeton team. So, like, Barnegat's done some good things. They just happen to lose to Point Borough twice, so it's hard to put them into that teen range over Point Borough, who has some ugly loss. Basically has the Brick Memorial loss to kind of keep. So you do wonder what the B South group is going to look like, and I think Lakewood's at the top of that list because they've played so well lately. They beat Neptune. They gave Lenape a game in overtime, and they do have this kind of ceiling about them that I wonder what it looks like if they're like the 10 seed and they get to play a CBA. Like, can Lakewood beat CBA? I think it'd be pretty interesting when you have a guy like Savoy out there who's one of the 10 best players in the Shore, conservatively speaking. That's going to be that's a team I'm really interested to see them get through the first round and who they match up with, assuming they get through that first game in that round of 16, whether it's as an 11, a 10, a 7. I'm curious to see how Lakewood fares in that spot.
Another team I think is an interesting team to watch because of the style of play is Marlboro, who on any given night can just put it all together and can be at times dazzling.
Yes, and it is one of those like like, what's so interesting about them is like they get out and run, and they don't do it with like a deep bench. Like they basically do it with 6 or 7 guys, and they basically say like, we're gonna run and we're not gonna get tired. Like, you may figure it out, but it's not going to be because we just run out of gas, because they just run for 32 minutes. They can handle it. It's just a matter of whether the other opponent can run with them for a while, keep up, and then maybe slow the game down when it's crunch time in the fourth quarter, when it does become more of a half-court game. And whether or not they can be within 12 points of Marlboro when it gets to that point. And, I think I think Manasquan will sit as a team that kind of says, all right, bring it on. I think,
and Middletown South certainly did when they played last week.
Middletown South will say, bring it on. Yeah, when you put up 100 points. Tomsriver North basically said, bring it on. So I think there are some teams that will basically say, we'll run with you for 3 quarters, and then we're going to slow it down in the fourth and put the game away. So I think that's what Marlboro's challenge is to say, to what degree can we kind of impose our will for 4 quarters, and can we get that big lead going into the fourth where we can, because they're hard to beat. I mean, it basically comes down to making free throws and then just getting a few stops on defense against a team that maybe you get a lead on. I think they did that against Wall in that WOBM, where that was a good game, but Marlboro really put it away because they put their foot on they had like a 9-point lead and they put their foot on the gas, and Wall just couldn't keep up. Whereas against like Tomsriver North, it was close throughout, and then Tomsriver North was the one who put their foot on the gas. So it's a game-to-game thing. You're going to see some contrast in styles. I mean, we talked about Homedale. If that's the 4-5 game, that's a clash of styles. Homedale is going to try to play half-court, defense, physical. They're going to try to do it with a couple different options. That would be an interesting game because you have 2 teams that want to play 2 very different ways. Yeah. And I think that's the one where you see like maybe Marlboro can just speed this game up to the point where Homedale is just moving a little too fast. But I don't think Homedale is going to make it that easy on them to play that up and down game. I think that's a game that's more like in the 60s, and maybe first to 65 as opposed to first to 90, which you saw on last Thursday night against Middletown South.
Manasquan got to the finals last year. I thought played a terrific game against Ranney.
Sure.
Gave Ranney a much better game than anyone would have expected. They have not won the Shore Conference tournament since 1957.
Yes.
So is this their tournament to lose?
Sure. Yes. And we talked about that with the Galvan situation. If he's good to play, even if he's a little bit limited, like I just don't see anybody matching up with them because that's too much size. It's too much good. I mean, their guards are terrific. I mean, Ben Roy and Kieran Flanagan. We get wrapped up so much in how big they are, and Galvan, when he gets going. But like Ben Roy is a Player of the Year candidate. Kieran Flanagan's a first-team All-Shore player who
I agree.
Just gives up like the stat. I compare him. He is to them what Amadou Sarner was to Ranney.
It's a good analogy.
I think the only difference is like they didn't. I think Amadou could kind of fall into the background a little bit more because of how good Scotty Lewis and Brian Antoine were. But he'd always show up when he needed to be there. Flanagan needs to be there every game for Manasquan to be as good as they've been, and he has. Like he is as reliable as you're going to find. He shows up every day. He doesn't take a play off on defense, and he doesn't care if he's scoring 4 points or whether he's scoring 24 points.
I think you can appreciate when I say he might be my favorite player that I've seen this year. And I got to see him a lot during the WOBM Classic in December. But every time you watch him play, you just come away so impressed with all the things he does.
Yeah, he is that guy that coaches. Every team watches Manasquan, they say, I like that guy.
Yeah.
Because, you don't see a ton of... Like, I caught some of the RBC game where they beat RBC on the road on Tuesday night, and... if you go watch them play against Homedale that game, he took a couple shots and they were huge. And against RBC, he was a little bit more of a shoot-first player, a little bit more aggressive. Whatever Manasquan needs on a given night, just ask Kieran Flanagan to handle it, and he can do it. And then, yes, they have Ben Roy, who's so
Exquisite.
fun to watch.
Yeah.
And they have the role players have done a great job. Whether it's McEnany, whether it's Jack Collins, Connor Walsh, they've all kind of stepped up and had their moments. Certainly Casey Mulligan deserves a mention there with the defense he plays. I mean, he's 5'8", he plays like he's 6'3", and that's kind of their whole team. Like they're a bunch. If you're a sub 6 foot guy on a team, you play like you're 6'3", and if you're like 6'5", you play like you're 6'9". They're really impressive, and there's so much more to them than just. They have the best players. It's a really cohesive group that's got a lot of potential beyond just this tournament, which is why you got to consider them the favorite, even if there's a little bit of a concern with what's going on with Galvan and how available he's going to be early in the tournament.
Well, I always say the Shore Conference tournament is the one that brings fans out of the woodwork. Some who will go to a game here and there, but they all kind of circle it on their calendar, especially once you get to the quarterfinal round, which will be on the Sunday, February 23rd at the RWJ Barnabas Health Arena, when you get to see 4 really good games. And you get to see players like James Anderson of Middletown South, Alex Ratner of Marlboro, who maybe you heard about, you didn't get a chance to see. They're all in the same gym on the same day. So I look forward to it. You'll, of course, have the seating information on Sunday once that becomes available on shoresportsnetwork.com. And, of course, you can follow Matt on Twitter. And these next couple of weeks for you, who sometimes has to sit through a mundane game or two in December and January, now they're all big.
Always love it when we get to this point. Survive in advance. Let's go. Let's do it.
Matt Manley, Shore Sports Network. Follow him right now through the end of the season, including the state tournament in March. So for Matt Manley, I'm Kevin Williams. Thanks for watching the Shore Sports Network. And stick with us throughout the basketball season.